So my guest today is one of those guests who absolutely gives me chills down my spine and gets me super excited and completely humbles me. And this guest is the amazing Dr. Terry Wahls. And I became a really big fan of Dr. Wahls ever since I heard her speak on the very first TED Talk that I ever listened to, ever. You were the first. 10 years ago. And was a TED Talk that she did on her journey into multiple sclerosis, which went totally viral and now has over 3 million views. It's just exploded. And I'm sure you heard of Dr. Terry Wahls before, but in case you haven't, she is an Institute for Functional Medicine certified practitioner and a clinical professor of medicine at the University of Iowa, where she now conducts some pretty groundbreaking clinical trials. And in 2018, she was awarded the Institute for Functional Medicine's Linus Pauling Award for her contributions in research, clinical care, and patient advocacy. And what makes her truly unique in her practice is that she is also a patient with secondary progressive multiple sclerosis, which originally confined her to a tilt recline wheelchair for 4 years. And that's a pretty darn long time of being uncomfortable, but it's still light years shorter than most anyone else who is diagnosed with MS, who may be relegated to a wheelchair for the rest of their lives and ultimately bedridden as the disease progresses. And Dr. Wahls' personal story is unbelievably inspirational because she restored her health using a diet and lifestyle program that she designed specifically for her brain. And now she rides her bike to work every single day. And she is the author of the Wahls Protocol, a radical new way to treat all chronic autoimmune conditions using paleo principles, and a pretty cool cookbook called the Wahls Protocol Cooking for Life. And this is a protocol that she's been using with her patients in her clinical practice, improving the quality of life for thousands of patients living with MS. And she's not messing around with pseudoscience either. She conducts her own research now and has published over 60, that's a 60, peer-reviewed scientific abstracts and papers. And if you can't wait to learn more about her multiple sclerosis clinical trials, you can head over to wahls.lab.uiowa.edu, and I'll have all of this stuff in the show notes later. And now, before we meet this beacon of light, I have to read the disclaimer so that there's no confusion. The statements and products talked about in this presentation and in Dr. Wahls' books and websites have not been evaluated by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. These statements and products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. And we expressly disclaim all liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on any or all of the information or other contents of these materials. They're for educational and informational purposes only, not intended as medical advice. The information does not create, nor is it intended to replace a relationship with a qualified healthcare professional. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or your health, and prior to starting dietary routines, exercise, or supplements. So now, with that out of the way, without further ado, please meet Dr. Terry Wahls. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to share your story about your journey into multiple sclerosis and how you've been able to heal yourself. And I know your story. It's clearly shared in your book. You did an amazing job with so much detail. And I know you shared it 1,000 times over, but could you briefly run through where you were when you first diagnosed with MS and how you got here today, to give some of the listeners your background and explain what exactly is multiple sclerosis? A lot of people may not know about.
So if we go back 20 years ago, I'm out walking with my wife, Jackie, and my left leg grows weak. Dragging it to hobble home, I see the neurologist who says, Terry, this could be bad or really, really bad. As I go through the workup over the next 2 weeks, I'm thinking about what does really, really bad mean. And actually, I'm praying secretly for a fatal diagnosis because I don't want to be disabled. 3 weeks later, I hear multiple sclerosis. 3 years later, I hear tilt, recline, wheelchair. I take mitochondrial infusions, then tizabri infusions. Nothing helps. I am too weak to sit up at my desk. My zingers, the face pains, trigeminal neuralgia, they turn on. And tears stream down my face as my 10-year-old daughter hugs me. Fortunately, I'm also a physician. Night after night, I go to PubMed to read the basic science, and I begin experimenting on myself. And the speed of my decline slows. And then I discover a study using electrical stimulation of muscles and add that to my physical therapy. My test session hurts like hell, but I stay with it. And to my amazement, things begin to improve. You know, my physicians say functions once lost will never come back. But I'm wondering, am I really doing all that I can? I go back to meditating. I redesign my paleo diet that I'd been on already for 5 years based on all the science that I've been studying. And 3 months later, my zingers of 27 years are gone. And my fatigue is gone. And my physical therapist says, Terry, you're definitely getting stronger. He advances my exercise. And 3 months after that, I am walking without a cane. And 3 months after that, I bike for the first time in 6 years with my son, Zach, jogging alongside on the left, my daughter, Zeb, on the right. My kids, my wife, they are crying, and so am I. It changes how I think about disease and health. It changes the way I practice medicine and the focus of my research. And now, 10 years later, I've conducted 5 clinical trials, all investigating diet and lifestyle to address fatigue and quality of life. All of the studies have shown that people, yes, they can implement diet and lifestyle changes, and that many, the vast majority, experience reduced fatigue, improved quality of life. We've just completed one of the largest studies, actually I think the largest study that's been done to date, comparing a low saturated fat diet to the Wahls diet. And we're able to show that compared to the observation period, fatigue went down, quality of life improved, mental clarity, working memory improved, walking endurance improved. And the Wahls diet was better than the Swank diet on some, but not all measures. The key point is people can make changes that are under their control that have a favorable impact on fatigue, energy, and quality of life.
Yes, this story is mind-blowing, because when a doctor tells you you can't reverse the damage that's been done, I can imagine most people would just give up, but you decided to push through and not believe exactly what you hear or question it, and you delved into the research. Like, how did you even come up with the
Well,
idea that you have control over this?
you know, actually, Zora, I was doing all of that not to recover, because I believed what my physicians were telling me, that decline was inevitable, but what I could do is slow the decline. So I was doing everything, and I had 2 young children at the time that I was diagnosed, ages 5 and 8. And by the time they were 11 and 8, I'm in the decline wheelchair. And my ability to parent is severely constricted. But I'm thinking deeply about this. What they're watching me, and I can either model, sure, life's not fair, but you get up, you do the best you can anyway. And so I kept doing my exercises. They kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller. I would go to work, and they had chores. And I would later realize that I'm either modeling that you give up when life is tough, or you keep doing the best you can, no matter how tough life becomes.
Mm. I'm wondering if you got some of that mentality from your Taekwondo days, you were an athlete. I mean, you were doing some
Yeah, yeah.
hardcore stuff, and to
Hardcore
be
stuff. Fighting, full contact, free sparring. Yeah, before I entered medical school, I was competing nationally for the Pan American trials. I was a bronze medalist. Yeah, I was definitely a kick 'em up kind of girl. Um, and I'll tell you also that when I was diagnosed with MS, exercise was not a thing that they told people with MS to do. In fact, you're supposed to sort of avoid that. But I knew in my heart that if I didn't keep exercising every day, that the decline would be worse. So that was the one thing that I did correctly from the very beginning. Was I kept exercising when I couldn't run. I Yeah, and actually, I was sort of fussing over how expensive this was, but my mom said, "Terry, for heaven's sakes, if this lets you be active a little bit longer, put the pool in, spend the money. Your kids will enjoy it. It'll be the most important money that you're going to spend." And she was right. It was a very important part of my being able to continue exercising.
Yeah, and exercise is another great chapter you included in your book as well. And when I'm thinking of somebody with autoimmune disease or multiple sclerosis, and you're in pain, and so I can imagine
A lot of pain.
the force that you needed to do that. It must be so easy just to give up and say, you know what, I'm
Well,
just tired.
my mantra was, "Your kids are watching. What do you want to model?"
Wow.
And yeah, actually, my kids are now adults, 30 and 27, and they talk a lot about how impressed they are with my level of discipline. That I got up every day, I kept working out, even though my workouts were getting smaller and smaller.
Wow, you just, yeah, you kept it going. And your doctor didn't at any point say you're crazy, you shouldn't be exercising. What are you doing?
Well, I didn't tell my doctor I was exercising.
You had your own
Although
plan.
I did finally ask my doctor. Said, I really should be getting a physical therapy referral, and then I got that going, and I saw, and I still see a physical therapist regularly to evaluate, my strength, my balance, and help me redefine and redesign my exercise program as my strength improved.
Mm. And you did a great job explaining which exercises people could do in the book as well. It's so detailed. It's really really good. I think encouraging people to
Yeah.
actually move.
And the other thing that I did very nicely is I showed how you could make things easier or harder, so that there were very adaptable exercises depending on your level of function and disability.
Yeah. So let's talk about a little bit more about what this disease is. It's a neurodegenerative
Hmm.
disease. So it's obviously very painful. You couldn't walk. You have brain fog. You can't think straight, and you have this progressive decline. And you talked a little bit about the mitochondrial function. That was what your TED talk was about as well. Could you fill us in a little bit on what more is multiple sclerosis and how do mitochondria play a role in this disease and perhaps other autoimmune diseases?
So the brain and the spinal cord are attacked by immune cells that damage the myelin. That's the fatty insulation on the wiring between brain cells. But we also begin to realize that it's damaging other cells in the brain as well. There's more inflammation. There's not enough energy being produced. It's the mitochondria that provide the energy, but also the mitochondria that can drive fuel on the inflammation. And fortunately, as I was reading the basic science, my conclusion was that for me, I had mostly this slow, gradual decline with only 2 relapses in the entire time period. And so the energy production I thought was the biggest driver. So I wanted to maximize the efficiency and effectiveness of my mitochondria. And when you look at aging related issues, Mitochondria will play a big role there. If you look at mental health issues, mitochondria play a big role. If you look at some of the other metabolic problems, heart disease, insulin resistance, turns out mitochondria have a big role to play there. So by addressing your mitochondrial health, if you have a complex your health and reducing symptoms related to those issues. And you're also improving your healthy aging.
So just in case some people don't know, mitochondria is an organelle in your cells, and that's where ATP or your energy is produced. So these are your powerhouses of the cells. If you go back to biology, remember that. So super important energy for so many functions. So thank you so much, for explaining a little bit about that, and what are the risk factors of multiple sclerosis, and I want to keep in mind, some of the women who are listening, over 50, if there's any more risk for them than anyone else.
Well, women are more likely to get MS than men, and it's diagnosed most often in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. However, we're now having more women in their 50s being diagnosed with MS in a more progressive phase. People often have a prodrome of pelvic pain, endometriosis, chronic migraines, infertility that may have gone on 5 to 10 years. Then you have the development of MS or another serious autoimmune disease such as rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease, psoriasis.
Wow.
And we know that there's a infection that is step one. You have a genetic vulnerability at the basis, and then you may have toxin exposures, stress issues, microbiome issues, hormone balances that accelerate the disease process and cause that smoldering prodrome to flip over into an active autoimmune process, which might be MS, or it might be autoimmune thyroid disease, or inflammatory bowel disease, or rheumatoid arthritis.
So if any of these conditions you have, please be on the lookout. And what I'm thinking is you said you had your zingers for 27 years or so. And so you had some signs of
correct
in the
so
advance.
I had the facial zingers. These are trigeminal neuralgia. I'd had endometriosis. I'd had infertility, had to go through IVF to have my kids, and I'd had migraines since I was an adolescent. So in retrospect, all sorts of prodrome issues. And then when I had my daughter, I'd had severe preeclampsia. And as I was being evaluated for that, I had a positive anti-nuclear antibody. So I had autoantibodies. So again, lots of prodrome that was going on. And then it was, about 3 years later that I had the weakness developed in my left leg and was finally diagnosed with MS.
So what were you thinking during this time? Because you were in your 30s, 40s?
So
you thought it was normal?
No, but I was still able to be an athlete. I'm still biking, skiing, running. I'm a busy physician. I'm wanting to have kids, going through IVF to have my son and then my daughter. And it's just like doing all that I can to achieve the goals that I had in mind.
So is perhaps you think you were just, pushing it, and that's normal, and you're a high achiever, obviously, and maybe that's just the results.
There's work to do, and there's no use in complaining about it.
Yeah, I got it. Well, that's interesting. And now in retrospect, you can see some of those signs as well.
Yes,
so
yes.
What about women? Because it sounds like it's funny because I'm doing a master's in gerontology, and we did cover briefly multiple sclerosis. But this is a disease, like you said, diagnosed, earlier on in your 30s and 40s. So what's happening? Why are more people being diagnosed in their 50s? Is it we're living
Well,
longer or something
no,
else going
I'd say
on?
that we probably have poorer diets. There's more toxins. There's been a relaxation of some of the environmental standards. So air quality has declined. Here in Iowa, water quality has declined. And I think that's probably true nationally. Now, in addition, with the coronavirus epidemic, it would appear that about a third of people who are diagnosed with coronavirus end up with um, prolonged symptoms following and have evidence of excessive inflammation, a lot of autoimmune processes. And many of us are hypothesizing that these folks will be on track to develop another autoimmune diagnosis in the next 5 years or so. In that the COVID long haulers, that's really an autoimmune prodrome.
Mm. Yeah, it sounds like it would be a trigger, especially if you have the genes, because as I
Mhm.
understand for disease, it's environmental situations plus your genes and some trigger, and there you got it. A big wake up call. So yeah, that will be interesting to see in the future if that's actually what's going to happen. But do women respond differently than men to multiple sclerosis?
Yeah, so men are more likely to have the progressive disease. Women are more likely to have relapses, yeah, followed by remissions, and then transition to a progressive form of the disease. Men have typically a more rapid decline into disability. There is a different trajectory of illness for men and women.
Interesting. Yeah, we know why.
No doubt it has to do with estrogen and testosterone. That's part of that.
Yeah, more studies need to be done on females in general, and hopefully in multiple sclerosis as well. So, are there any? I know we have these risk factors, but do we know what causes it, and is there anything we can do to prevent it?
So the standard approach is you have a genetic vulnerability, inciting infection that most of us will clear that infection and not develop a problem. But for some, we continue to develop an abnormal immune response. And then that milieu interacts with, quote, unknown environmental factors, things that increase the risk: low vitamin D, obesity, smoking, air pollution. Uh, 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 um, and so likely your toxic exposures, lead, mercury, other solvents. We know hormonal imbalance, whether it's thyroid or sex hormones, cortisol is a problem. Traumatic brain injury increases the risk. Severe adverse childhood experiences increase the risk. Ongoing chronic adult stress increases the risk. Poor diet increases the risk. So when I put on my conventional medicine hat, the response is, we don't really know. I put on my functional medicine hat as, we know a lot. So address the stuff that's under your control.
Mm.
So it depends on, do you need to have a one-on-one, like a Koch's postulate, if this, then that? Then the answer, we don't know. If you're willing to use more of a fuzzy logic, all of these factors are important. So address the ones that are relevant for you in your life. Then that's the functional medicine approach. And that's what I teach in my courses, in my book. And that's what I teach my patients in my private practice.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's great that you have a program. If anybody's a health practitioner, they can go through some training with you or health coaching and
Yeah,
get more training. Is that how does that work?
correct. Well, we have a virtual online course, and actually we're transitioning it into a module base, so people can buy modules at one at a time, and then sign up to take the exam. And then once you take the exam, you get access to the monthly Q&A calls and discussions that I have with our practitioners. And the beauty of what I teach is that, yes, I teach some of the functional medicine concepts, integrative concepts, but I also teach evolutionary medicine, and I teach the Wahls behavior change model, because the reasons our patients are successful is a little bit, the advice that I have to say in terms of what exercise, what diet, and what supplements. That's about 5%, but 95% is helping them actually be successful at adopting and implementing behavior change, because behavior change is incredibly hard. It is hard for us to extinguish harmful addictive behaviors and to create new health promoting habits and routines. It's incredibly difficult. Most physicians, including functional medicine physicians, don't get very much training on how to be successful at that. And we have a lot of programming and support to teach you how to be much more effective with helping your patients create these new habits and extinguish the harmful ones.
It's pretty much the most important part, I think, because doctors can tell you do this, but they don't really tell you how. And that's just why so many diets fail in general, because people get tired of it. They don't know how to stick to it. So I think that's a huge, important component that you have. And that you explain that so well as in your book as well, that the importance of doing that. And I think you give some great motivation. You talked about, when people hear about the Wahls protocol, they think of the diet. It's just everything's food.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk a bit about that, because I find it, it is quite strict. I mean, you have different levels. And so, people, that's where the motivation needs to come in. But you also, which I'm so grateful that you did cover, all the other aspects, such as sleep and stress management, your purpose in life, all of these very important social factors that a lot of people may tend to ignore. And I think that's a really, really important, and the exercise, of course. So I'm so grateful that you've included that functional medicine approach. But let's talk about the food, because people love to talk about the food when it comes to it's so life-changing for them. And what would you recommend? What do you recommend to add, and what to take out?
So the first thing I want to understand is a little bit about the person. Are they a meat eater? Are they vegetarian, vegan? And is that for health reasons? Is it for a spiritual practice? Because we need to honor that. And then I also may, being a ketogenic eater is also very popular right now. So I want to know where they're at presently, what their goals are.
Mm-hmm.
And I categorize the vegetables that I want people to have based on food groups to get the nutrient profiles that we're looking for. So greens, sulfur-rich, deeply pigmented. We talk about how to get protein. Many of our vegetarian and vegan patients have inadequate protein in their diets. Many of our omnivore patients may have a high protein diet and not enough resistant starch and fruits and vegetables. Then we'll talk about fermented foods and whether or not they tolerate them, how to gradually increase the ferments in their diet. And we'll talk about trace minerals, essential fats. But importantly, we make these changes at a pace that the person and their family can adopt and sustain. It's much more important to be successful with each step that you take than to prescribe the perfect diet that the person can only halfway do. I'd rather that we identify what is the steps that you can take that you are confident you can completely successfully do before you come back and see me. Because doing the recommendations only 50% is not that helpful.
And yourself, did you go cold turkey and with some of these changes, or did you need to gradually get into them?
What I want to point out to everyone is this was a journey of discovery. So in 2002, my physicians at the Cleveland Clinic introduced me to the paleo diet. And so after 20 years of being a vegetarian, I went back to eating meat. Big change, continued to decline. I'm reading the basic science. I'm tuning in on various supplements, nutraceuticals, which I'm adding. And I slow my decline, still a very much paleo diet. And in the summer of '07, I discovered functional medicine, take their courses on neuroprotection, have more supplements. And then I have a really big aha moment that summer. And that is like, what if I take this list of nutrients that I'm taking and figure out where they are in the food supply? So instead of being so focused on what to not eat, I focus a little bit more on what to eat and how to get this from the food. And that was more research. The Linus Pauling Institute on Micronutrients was very helpful in helping me organize that. And so it was in December of '07, and December 26th was, the day that I first started eating with this very intentional of what to eat. In that first month, the speed of my recovery was shockingly fast. And then as I began teaching what I was doing to my patients, I realized I can't give people just list of foods to eat. I need to give them a framework to construct their plate. And that's how I ended up creating the Wahls protocol and the various incremental steps that people could take. In that we, created the vegetarian option, the meat eaters option. And so there is a way to guide people step by step on that journey.
Yes, you do that. You were very, very thorough. And as I go along, I imagine people think, oh, well, I can't eat this or I can't eat that. And you do cover it very well. You also covered supplements, which people love. We have a couple of supplement junkies here, including me, who love to just pop a pill. And you make it very clear that that's a supplement to an already, getting your food, your nutrients from the food. You make that super clear. And the supplements are there just to maybe bump it up a notch if you're not having success or you're deficient in something. So I'm wondering, you did mention magnesium L-threonate, which I did a very interesting podcast with Dr. Sandra Kaufman on the brain and the brain health. And the 3 molecular agents that she recommended was the magnesium L-threonate, andrographolide, and spermidine. So I'm wondering if you
let's talk about
else.
spermidine. So spermidine is the magic molecule that a lot of the anti-aging folks really, really love. It's from wheat germ, and it increases the rate of autophagy, which is the sort of the self-cleaning cycle where we take poorly performing proteins, digest them, and rebuild them. So it's a great way to use it. Problem with spermidine is that it's out of wheat germ. It's going to have a lot of gluten in it, or at least enough that I can't take it because that would trigger my face pain. So what I did is what I've done all along is like, okay, that's a really useful nutrient. Where do I get it in the food supply? Well, how does my body make that? What could I do to increase my own ability to make spermidine? A lot. So legumes, when your body digests them, will make more spermidine if you have a healthy microbiome. So that's helpful. If you are someone who tolerates legumes, and you may or may not, another thing that you could do is to have sauerkraut in kimchi, because that provides the bacteria that will make the spermidine. So what I have done, because natto is a fermented bean product that you can use soybeans or black beans or other beans. And so I mix my homemade natto with my homemade kimchi or sauerkraut, 2 to 4 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil, and eat that. So now I'm boosting my spermidine that I can make. So when you hear all these discussions about these great supplements, I encourage you, all of you, to think more like I'm thinking, like, okay, so that's a vital nutrient. What can I do to make it easier for my body to make more of that important nutrient, or to get more of that nutrient in my diet? Because when you make when they make these supplements, keep in mind that the manufacturing processes have to add additives and surfactants, emulsifiers to get the little compound to go through the various devices to roll into the pill, the capsule to make the capsule, or to be compressed into a tablet to make the tablet.
Mm.
So in addition to that magic nutrient, you're getting some extra stuff that is not quite so magical.
Mm.
So the supplements may be helpful, but some people cannot tolerate any of the supplements because of those emulsifiers and surfactants that are used in the manufacturing process. If you can figure out where it is in the food supply and what you can do to increase your body's ability to make that nutrient, that may be an alternative strategy.
Yes, always get it from the food first. Did you have a natto recipe in the cookbook, or at least in the Wahls protocol?
No, I did
That's
not, because I'm continuously reading and learning. That is a concept that I've implemented in the last year.
Oh, I would love, yeah, to learn how to make my own natto. I had plenty of it when I was in Japan, but now that I'm now in Portugal, I can't find it for the life
Yeah,
of me. I'll
yeah.
have to make it. But yes, and also mushrooms, I understand. I also have a lot of spermidine and aged cheese rind. This is, probably if you're on the dairy, removing dairy from the protocol, you couldn't do that. But it's one of those things that, yeah, I think like with any supplement, I think you did a really great job explaining, always get it from the food first. But supplements are those funny things that, they're not regulated. There's some really good stuff out there and there's some really not so good stuff out there, and it's always important to read what's in there. The spermidine I take, they have very, very minimal their processing in there, and it is made out of the wheat, but most people who are gluten-free don't seem to have an issue. But I know that spermidine also comes from soybean as well, so I think there's some supplements out there using the soy, but again, like you said, the practices are super important, and the one we take is also has some prebiotics in there so that you can make your own spermidine. So I found out I can go on and off and still have some pretty good magic happening even when I'm off it, because it helps me produce my own.
Yeah.
So
yes, spermidine certainly looks like a really important or very useful nutrient if you're interested in healthy aging. So absolutely.
yeah, it's one of those new things out there that a lot of people are talking about lately. So super cool that you can give us advice on where to get more of it in our food. So I wanted to ask you as well. Some people still refuse to believe that you can reverse multiple sclerosis, and even some people criticize your protocol as relying too much
Oh
on
goodness,
some
yes.
anecdotal evidence. Some say there's no research to back your
Yeah,
claims, which is not true.
it is all of us, biologically, we're very resistant to new ideas. And let me sort of explain biologically why that happens. There is a overwhelming amount of information that comes to all of our brains through our sensory organs. And our brain has to damp down that information into smaller and smaller amounts, so that I'm learning how to interact with the world with less than 1% of the sensory information that's coming up with my vision, my hearing, my touch, my proprioception. And that's necessary for survival. So we can exist. And as an infant, we begin to learn to ignore information. And then as we get older, we again ignore information that does not fit into our understanding of the world. We have to get an overwhelming amount of information that doesn't fit into our understanding of the world before we'll go like, I have to revise my understanding of the world. That is a really big change that's going to happen in my brain, to reject previously understood constructs for how I understand the world. We do that with our social world. We do that in the business world. We do that in the scientific world. We'll do that with our friendships, with our romantic partners. We all do that. It's a necessary part of human life. So it would be foolish for me to be angry at my physician colleagues for ignoring me and finding all sorts of flaws with my experience, with my research, because I'm forcing them to change their understanding of the world. Now, and that's the role of all innovators. We have to have thick hides. You have to be willing to do your stuff, and realize that eventually you'll either be ignored and burned at the stake, or you'll begin to have some people who are willing to change their understanding of the world, and gradually more and more people. And if you can connect with influencers and connectors to help facilitate that, there's a big process to go through. We have been able to get more research. We just completed that large study funded by the MS Society, which is the largest dietary study to date. That was published and has done very well. I'm in the process of getting approval to do an even larger study that will last 2 years. It's controlled. It's going to be very exciting. Again, we'll look at a ketogenic diet, the Wahls diet, and dietary guidelines. It's going to be a transformational study, absolutely. And we continue to investigate diet and lifestyle. We're going to be writing grants for a stopping study to evaluate how we could more safely discontinue disease-modifying drugs. And what I am finding is, in the MS world, I've made dietary research acceptable now. There are more scientists, researchers that are investigating diet in humans. I have collaborators that are investigating diet in mice and looking at the molecular mechanisms of what we are doing. And so in 11 years, I've gone from being this crackpot idiot that people were condemning to being increasingly recognized as being a very important driver in this diet and lifestyle conversation for MS and autoimmune research. That is very fast. And I know people are sort of frustrated that it should be faster. I just have to push back at everyone. We all do this. We all ignore information that doesn't fit our understanding of the world, because that is just necessary for our ability to function in our work life, in our social life, in our family life. And it takes a lot of evidence before I will abandon my understanding of some aspect of my life. We all do that.
Yeah, it's a psychological issue. That's how we compartmentalize information, and it's hard to admit you're wrong sometimes, or the science has changed, or
Right.
I'm thank goodness you're here. Keep pushing along, because you are changing the whole paradigm and the story and changing science. So we only have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure we have time for people to ask their own questions. But before we do that, I want to go through a little bit about this 4-part seminar series that you're having, this virtual event coming next February, I think is with the first one, right?
Well, actually, we're going to start in December with a cooking class. And so that's people, I encourage people to sign up for that. We'll talk about holiday cooking. And then the actual seminar starts in February. We do 4 series. The first one is brain health basics. Then we're going to have one on toxins, one on growing your resilience, emotional and cellular resilience. And then the 4th one is on healthy aging. And so we have a wonderful lineup of speakers. And at each juncture, I'm also going to be doing some lectures on updates, either from the MS research world or updates from the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine or the Institute for Functional Medicine. I've been working on updates from the America's Committee on the Treatment and Research in MS, the Europeans Committee on Treatment and Research in MS, and the Consortium of MS Centers. And so if you want to know the latest basic science and the latest clinical standards for treating MS, or you want to know the latest on the insights in the functional medicine world, this seminar series is just unparalleled for what we'll be offering.
So there's 4 sessions. They're a day and a half, more or less, long.
Mm-hmm.
And they're set apart about, seems 2 to 3 months apart. So you have time to digest and practice the information. The cooking class is perfect timing to get started for the holidays. And is there a limited amount of people who can go in, and what's the price?
I'm going to confess, I hesitate to with the prices. I don't want to get it wrong. So please go to my website, terrywahls.com, so it can give you the details on the price. This will depend on when you buy it. If you've decided to bundle it all together, or if you're buying just one course at a time. And are you getting it before the first of the year or after the first of the year? So there's those details are on my website, terrywahls.com. So,
Yes.
You know, and I should also add, Zora, that in addition to the 1.5 day lecture session, there's 4 weeks follow-up with more coaching and some more information at that time. So it's a phenomenal way to have a touch point to get ongoing coaching and support for implementing the concepts that you've decided these are things that I would like to add to my life and to my routine.
It's a perfect component. I remember just saw that. Yeah, people need guidance. You're not going to be let alone in between sessions. So please check that out at terrywahls.com. That's TERRYWAHLS.com/seminar. And you can see all the details there. And before we wrap up, I'm going to open the panel. Anyone here in the audience has questions, you can unmute your mic. And we've got just about 7-8 minutes for that before we'll have to wrap up.
Hi, I do have a question. And first of all, thank you so much. I've read your book. I love it. I had the mononucleosis and I realized, that was 20 years ago, that I became a paleo eater because of the mono. And so when I read your book, I realized that you are listing a lot of vegetables. And then I was thinking, like, when people don't have the money, like, to eat so many vegetables and fruits, like, what would help them to have at least like the minimum that the body would need to, get the best nutrients and energy?
So that's an economic discussion. What can we do to help people have better economics? But in my book and in the Wahls Protocol Cooking for Life, I talk about how to eliminate food waste because so many people buy food and don't know how to cook it, prepare it, and end up throwing a lot of their food away. So learning how to make a menu, plan a shopping list, plan for leftovers, and what to do with your food so that you are either fermenting or making soups or stews so that you're not throwing your food away. That will make things far more affordable. And then you can look at, there are vegetables, dried mushrooms, dried onions, dried garlics, dried herbs that are generally very affordable. Onions, garlic have a long shelf life, likewise very affordable. Cabbages, very long shelf life. Root vegetables, very long shelf life. And my mother and my grandmothers grew up without refrigeration. So they learned how to make fermented vegetables from the extra stuff they had in the summer and leave it in the root cellar. And that's how they had their vitamin C all winter long, was from their fermented vegetables.
It's like becoming an alchemist of your becoming
more
than becoming an alchemist, because you said something that stayed with me. Reframe how to construct your plate, like, because I read a book about colors in a plate, and like, so I don't know, it kind of like, it's almost like a strategy of getting the best nutrients and the energy
Correct.
by creating your plate. And I never
And
thought
you
of
want to
that.
think about, okay, I have to live within my economic reality. What are the things that I can do that would be helpful? How to redirect my funds away from foods that are disease promoting towards foods that are more health promoting, getting less costly forms of meat. Kidney, for example, very inexpensive. Tripe, very inexpensive. Liver, very inexpensive. Butcher bones, very inexpensive. So learning how to use some of the organ meats make things less costly. Gizzards, sweetbreads, also very inexpensive.
You're right. You'd be so proud of me yesterday. And today I had the giblets from a chicken. I was looking for organic. I couldn't, it was super cheap. And I think nobody really wants the giblets. These are the heart, the kidneys,
Correct.
and it is super cheap, and you can make it so good. And I followed one of your recipes. So it was really, really tasty. I was inspired.
Well,
And I also made the bone broth because of reading your book.
And there was I was looking for a Portuguese Spanish recipe. Apparently this is popular in South America and in the Philippines, to take organ meats, olives, peppers, and some cumin, cinnamon, bay leaves. I made a lovely little stew out of that. I did it while my family was away, and I had that, and then I had it with a big helping of kimchi, and it was, just really very, very delicious. Yeah, and the bison kidney was incredibly inexpensive, because people don't realize that organ meats are such a powerhouse of great nutrition. But of course, the market prices are such that few people know how good they are for us, and that prepared properly, they can be quite tasty.
Exactly. They're right. So that you can get in the cookbook as well. And maybe we've got one more last question. If anyone has a quick question before we let Dr. Wahls go.
I saw someone ask, so why do I
Oh,
eat
yeah.
eggs? Eggs
Yeah.
are the third most common food sensitivity protein. So I would take eggs out, ideally for 3 months, but at least a month, and then reintroduce them and see if that leads to a redevelopment of mental or physical symptoms. And I provide guidance on that removal and reintroduction phase in my book.
Yes, the elimination diet was very detailed, and there's a whole explanation. I highly encourage everyone to please get the book. It's so easy to follow, and I absolutely loved it. And you can find Dr. Terry Wahls on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. I'll have all of the links in the show notes, and super easy to find her. And just Google it. You'll find everything that you need. If you want to get involved with a virtual Wahls Protocol seminar, please go and check that out. It's at terrywahls.com/seminar. And we have a freebie. You can pick up a one-page handout of the Wahls diet. That's wonderful at terrywahls.com/diet. I'll have the links to that too. So I know you've got another place to go to be right now. So I'm super grateful that you are here, that you shared, that you keep plowing along and just doing your research. It's fantastic. If there's any other way we can support you, please don't hesitate to reach out, and hope you have a wonderful day.